For years, they have told us it's a myth. The blurry photos, the shaky videos, campfire whispers passed down through generations. But what if, just this once, the camera caught something it wasn't supposed to?
Look out, Jut!
2025 has been a strange year for Bigfoot believers, and an even stranger one for skeptics. Across the continent, from the icy trails of Alberta to the mist-wrapped swamps of Mississippi, people are encountering something they can't explain. This isn't just another countdown. This is a journal of fear, a record of sightings that defy science and everything we thought we knew about the wild places on our planet. These are the top 8 Bigfoot sightings in 2025 that can't be explained. Banff, Alberta, one of the most breathtaking corners of Canada. Towering mountain peaks, icy rivers, and dense forests that stretch endlessly into the wild. It's a place known for its elk herds, grizzly bears, and winter storms that can roll in without warning. But deep in this snowy silence, something else may be roaming. On a frigid day in early winter 25, a lone hunter set out into these frozen woods. He wasn't a thrill seeker, no social media stunts, just a seasoned outdoorsman, tracking elk in the same remote region he had hunted for years. But this time, something was different. The snowfall was relentless. Heavy flakes covered everything in a thick white sheet. The sound of the forest, gone. No birds, no breeze, not even the distant echo of a branch cracking under weight. Just stillness, a kind of stillness that feels off. That's when it started. That gut-deep feeling, like he wasn't alone, like eyes were locked on him from somewhere beyond the trees. He stopped, slowly scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Still, the sense of being watched pressed down harder. He'd felt it before, but never this strong. He raised his camera, more out of instinct than curiosity. And there, through the falling snow, it appeared. Standing roughly 50 yards away was something. Not an elk, not a bear. A tall, dark figure, upright, motionless, its back turned to the camera but still clearly visible. Black fur covered its body, broad shoulders, long muscular arms that nearly reached its knees. It stood like a man, but no man was that big. No man moved like that. Except, it wasn't moving at all. It didn't turn. It didn't flinch. It just stood there, still as the trees around it. And that's what made it terrifying. Bears don't stand that long. Elk don't freeze like that. Even humans, once spotted, react. But this figure? It seemed to know it had been seen, and it didn't care. It was almost as if it wanted to be seen. Later, when he shared the footage, experts pointed to something curious. The body language. The creature wasn't startled. It didn't act like prey. It acted like a predator. One confident enough to let itself be noticed, just briefly. Before melting back into the woods, it knew far better than we ever could. This isn't the first time Banff has been whispered about in Bigfoot circles. Just a few years ago, a petroleum inspector traveling a nearby route reported an unsettling experience. While pulling over for a routine check, his dash camera captured something standing at the edge of the forest. Tall, upright, unmoving. It didn't run. It didn't approach. It simply stood between the trees, watching. And just like that, it vanished. Now, experts are connecting the dots. 2 sightings, 2 silent figures, both in the same region, both unafraid of being caught on camera. and both behaving in ways we still can't explain. Some believe it's the same creature, a lone Sasquatch that's claimed Banff's forests as its home. Others think it's part of something bigger, a migratory path that runs along the Canadian Rockies, stretching from British Columbia to Alberta and beyond.
Because this is something that's going to unfold. It's been unfolding for months. It's going to continue to unfold for months.
Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. This isn't the first strange encounter in Banff, and it likely won't be the last. These creatures, if they are creatures, don't just hide. Sometimes they appear with purpose. Sometimes they want to be seen. And when they do, it's never random. So if you ever find yourself walking the snow-dusted trails of Banff, Alberta, camera in hand, breath visible in the freezing air, look carefully. Because some legends don't hide in the shadows. They stand in the open. And sometimes they watch you, without ever needing to turn around. It was a Monday morning in the backwoods of rural America. Dry air, bare trees, dried leaves cracking with every step. A silence that only old, untouched forests know how to keep. And into that silence walked one man. And one man walked in alone. He'd been here before. He saw something large, unnatural. But that day, he had no camera, no proof. It is a great Bigfoot search, one man alone and without any fear chasing an inhumane creature. He has been warned by his friends but doesn't seem to care.
Before I go any farther, well, I'm going to walk over and check this one out. I'm going to walk over to this tree because I brought something with me.
This time he came prepared. He brought a camera and a stick. Not for protection, but for communication.
What's going to happen? But I brought this with me. It's my tree knocker.
See, among Bigfoot researchers and wilderness survivalists, there's something known as tree knocking. It's one of the oldest, most widely reported methods used to summon, or provoke, Sasquatch. The theory? These creatures use wood knocks to communicate with each other across long distances. So he lifted the stick and slammed it into a tree. Crack, the sound echoed. Starling birds. Then silence again. Just wind, and the trees swaying gently above.
Just see if there's an answer. Okay, here we go. Here we go.
The footage cuts. He turned the camera off for a moment. He says that's when it happened. He caught movement, something going up through the trees. His heart skipped a beat. It could be a deer, maybe a bear. But the size, the shape, it was far too big. And the way it moved.
And I looked up across that way, going up on that far ridge up there. I saw something big.
It wasn't running. It wasn't scared. It was deliberate. So he pressed on, whispering into the camera, speculating, watching. He lifted the stick again and knocked. Once, twice. Then it answered. Something moved far ahead, behind a line of thick trees. The camera caught it, just for a moment. A large, dark figure. It stepped forward, just enough to be seen. Then vanished again. No sound, no warning.
I'll try one knock and see what happens. That's okay. Jerked the camera when I hit. Didn't mean to do that.
Tree knocking has been reported across North America for decades. In Oregon, Washington, Kentucky, witnesses say they heard a knock, returned it, and got a response. But there's a warning too. Some experts believe that knocking back might not just mean hello. It could mean come fight. It could be seen as a challenge, a threat. So, what do you do if a creature like this steps out from the woods?
Something moved, just like step forward. I don't know if the camera got it or not.
Well, first, don't run. Running triggers a chase, and if the legends are true, you won't outrun it. Stay calm, make yourself look bigger, raise your arms, speak firmly, but don't shout, and slowly back away. Never turn your back, never lose eye contact, and pray that it lets you go. Because if this thing was anything like what that man saw, it could tear through a human being like paper. Something had answered the knock, and that man? He found it. Or maybe it was waiting for him. Sometimes the woods answer back, and when they do, you better be ready. Next, we have a strange piece of footage that'll leave you with more questions than answers. Blue skies, snow-packed trails, mountains in the distance, and a small group of cross-country skiers gliding their way through a frozen wonderland. But what their camera captured that day was far from peaceful. The clip begins calmly, just skiers moving in formation. Then, without warning, a large moose barrels into frame, charging through the snow, fast, panicked. At first, the skiers thought it was just startled, maybe spooked by their presence, but then something else appeared in the background.
Hi there. My friend Claudia sent me this cool video of cross-country skiers and a moose, and asked me to take a look at a strange, dark-looking figure in the background.
A dark figure, large, upright, moving slowly behind the trees. It wasn't another skier. It wasn't a hunter. It looked like a man, but not quite. He appeared to be pushing something, possibly a snowmobile, down the same trail. But here's where it gets strange. The figure was too tall, too thick in build, and moved with a kind of force that didn't match a normal human stride. And just seconds earlier, the moose had run directly away from that direction. Coincidence? Or did the moose sense something none of the skiers could explain?
A large moose running right past these skiers. Be that as it may,
Was it just a person out of view? Or was it a Bigfoot, lurking in the trees, driving the moose forward?
getting a closer look at the figure in the background, I think we can pretty much see that it's a person.
That would explain the fear, the speed, the panic in that moose's body language. Because animals know, they sense what we can't, and whatever was behind it wasn't welcome company.
Pushing a snowmobile along the trail and then getting onto it. We can see his left leg as he gets back on after the moose leaves.
The footage is brief, but it's the kind that raises more questions than it answers. In the dense, mist-wrapped swamps of Mississippi, just 9 miles west of Tunica, something happened that would haunt one hunter for the rest of his life. His name was Josh, and he wasn't some weekend woodsman. This was his land, his usual spot for hog hunting. He knew every tree, every shadow, every sound these woods made. But that night, something felt off. The kind of off that doesn't make sense at first, until it's too late. It was just before dusk when Josh made his way out. The sky was already dimming, the sun slipping behind thick cypress branches as he settled near an old dead stump. Full camo, rifle slung, motionless, just like always, waiting for the hogs that usually showed up once the light began to fade. The swamp was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, no breeze rustling the branches, just silence. The kind that presses against your skin. A sound. Behind him caught his attention. Subtle. A rustle, like something rooting around in the underbrush. Josh didn't panic. His first thought was simple: hogs. He turned slowly, barely moving his head. But what he saw wasn't any hog. About 50 yards away, crouched low beside a stump, was a massive black figure. Its body shape wasn't animal. It had form, shoulders, a head that sat low between those shoulders. Long arms, thick, powerful, and hands. Human-like hands. The thing was digging, like it was searching for something in the mud. Its movements were deliberate, focused, not frantic like an animal. Josh's instincts kicked in, but not to run, to freeze. My first instinct wasn't, he later said. It was to run, but I couldn't even do that. Everything felt slow, heavy, like I wasn't in control. With shaking hands, he reached for his phone, tried to hit a record. He thinks he hit the button twice, missed it the first time. Then finally the red blink. And that's when a truck passed on a nearby road. The moment the sound hit the woods, the figure stood up. Josh watched in stunned silence. 7, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in thick, dark fur, broad as a refrigerator with arms hanging down to its knees. And the way it stood, like it didn't care it had been seen, like it wanted to be seen. That stump was huge, Josh later explained, and it stood next to it like it was nothing. I know what a bear looks like. That wasn't a bear. He ran as fast as he could. He was terrified when he saw the creature's height. When he got home, he uploaded the short, shaky footage to YouTube. It was his first ever video post. Some people dismissed it, said it was unclear, inconclusive. But others, especially hunters, trackers, said it had the ring of truth. As for Josh, he's never gone back to that part of the swamp alone. Not once. And who could blame him? Out in the deep woods of Mississippi, beneath moss-laced trees and thick fog, something else is walking the land. It watches, it waits, and sometimes it stands up. It was supposed to be just another quiet night in Henry County, Missouri. Way out in the sticks, peaceful, routine. A man steps outside, flashlight on his head, dogs by his side, Charlie, Roxy, and Gizmo, just doing their usual business near the burn barrels. But what happened next would shake even the calmest soul. Out of the corner of his eye, movement. At first he thought it was nothing. A raccoon? A deer maybe? That's normal out here. But when he turned toward it, his heart skipped a beat.
So this area right over here is where I seen it. Now, the trees where I seen it were right about there. And it walked from there and just kind of started circling away right over here. And right over here is whenever I started to lose sight of it. Now, I don't know if it is a footprint, but...
Two glowing red eyes, staring right back at him. Not from the ground, no. These eyes were high, level with the point where the branches split from the trunk of a tall tree. That's at least 8 feet up. And then the thing moved. Step by step. 15 heavy, deliberate steps, circling around him, behind the barrels, through the trees. Each step is loud enough to feel in your chest. Then he saw it. Not just the eyes anymore. The whole body. A towering creature, muddy brown, matted hair with streaks that looked like blood red. Its build was massive. Thick torso, long muscular arms, black shiny claws. Its jaw looked capable of tearing through bone. And it grunted, a terrifying sound, like a furious bull mixed with something human. Guttural, angry.
Almost looks like someone just stomped right there. And I mean, compared to my foot, it's a little bit bigger. I don't know if the camera does it justice, but this is the tree that I first saw it at.
Whatever it was watching him, circling, calculating. With fear pumping through his veins, he used the vibrate button on his dog's collars, his signal to run home. The dogs obeyed instantly.
As you can tell, it's pretty fucking high. So, its eyes was level with that, which is probably... shit, I don't know.
He rushed them inside, grabbed his 20-gauge gun, and stepped back out into the night. He shouted, loud, brave, but the creature didn't respond. It ran. Heavy footfalls disappearing into the woods.
At least 8 foot tall. As I said, walked from there, and then just fucking went all the way down there, kind of circling, and right as it was behind that shed is when I said, fuck it.
The next day he returned to the exact spot, showed the tree, the very one where the eyes stared down from. And judging by that tree, that thing had to be over 8 feet tall. So, what would you do? If your dogs were staring into the dark and something not quite human was staring back? Could it be Bigfoot? A monster of Missouri's deep woods? Some say yes, others don't believe it. But one thing's for sure, this man knows what he saw, and he'll never forget it. Banff, Alberta, March. Cold air rolling off the mountains. Snow falling in soft waves. The trees stood bare, branches outlined in white. This was elk country, prime terrain for experienced hunters. But that day, it wasn't elk that would be spotted in the forest northeast of Banff National Park. It was something much harder to explain. Something that's haunted the man who saw it ever since. The hunter had set out early. He wasn't new to these woods. He knew how to track, how to wait, how to recognize every sound that belonged. He moved carefully, rifle ready, his eyes scanning the tree line for movement. Elk season demands patience, and that's what he brought. What he wasn't expecting was silence. Not calm, peaceful silence, but that kind of eerie stillness that makes the back of your neck tense up. No birds, no wind, just snow falling, muffling everything. That's when he noticed it. Something shifted, barely, but enough to catch his eye. A dark mass crouched low between the trees, motionless. At first he thought it was a moose, hunkering down to conserve warmth. But the shape wasn't quite right. The limbs, the posture, the sheer size. And beside it, something even more chilling, the rib cage of a large animal. Stripped clean, bleached bone glinting against the snow. His instincts kicked in. If this wasn't a moose and some sort of a bear, he knew those animals, hunted them, tracked them. Whatever this was, it was different. Bigger, smarter. He didn't move, just lowered his breath and slowly reached for his phone. He hit a record. Through the shaking lens, through the misty air and falling snow, the image came into focus. A figure, massive, black fur from head to toe. But it wasn't alone. Tucked close into its chest, wrapped gently beneath its arm, was a smaller figure. A child, a baby, a mother. The creature didn't move much. It looked calm, resting, watching, maybe feeding. The ribcage beside her? Perhaps the remains of a fresh kill, perhaps evidence of a recent meal. And that child, small compared to her, but still unlike anything human. He kept filming. The camera captures her from the side. She's broad, strong, with long arms and thick legs. The snow clings to her fur. She doesn't acknowledge the hunter, doesn't flinch, doesn't react. It's like she already knew he was there, and she didn't feel threatened. Later, when the hunter reviewed the video, the magnitude of what he captured sank in. This wasn't just a creature. This was a family, a mother and her young, resting in the open, only partially concealed by trees and snow. Was she hiding, or was she making a point? There's a long history of sightings in and around Banff. From blurry photos to chilling howls echoing through the trees, the region has developed a reputation. But this encounter was different. It was clear, it was close, and it wasn't just a lone shadow in the woods. It was evidence of something bigger. A community, a hidden tribe. And if one mother is raising a child out there, how many others are there? Are they migrating, nesting, hunting? The questions pile up, but the footage remains. A reminder that sometimes what we think are legends are simply truths we're not ready to confront. The hunter didn't stay long. He backed away slowly. No sudden moves, no noise, just distance. Then, once out of sight, he ran. "I've seen bears, I've seen wolves. I've even startled a cougar once," he later said. But this was different. It was looking at me, without looking. I don't know what I saw, but I know what I felt. Fear. A strange sense of being the one who wandered too close. It has been said by many that the creature in the video may be the same Sasquatch spotted weeks earlier in another part of Alberta, caught on a dash camera by an oil inspector. That figure was tall, still, watching from the trees. Could it be a father, a sibling, or something else entirely? We may never know, but what we do know is that something is out there, not hiding, not running, but living, breathing, raising young in the forests we think we know so well. So if you're ever in Banff, and the snow gets too quiet, take a second look at the trees, because you might not be alone, and next time, the one watching might not let you walk away. Near Fort Frances, Ontario. March, bitter cold, snow drifting quietly through the trees. Out by Red Gut Bay, a girl sat in her home, isolated, peaceful, the kind of quiet you get only in the Canadian wilderness. It was a place she knew well, the trees, the trails, the light that moved through the pines. But on that day, something felt wrong. She didn't see movement, not exactly. It was more like presence, a feeling, as if something was there that didn't belong. She picked up her phone and began to record. What she captured? It might be one of the clearest glimpses of the unexplained we've seen in years. At first, the footage shows nothing out of place. Trees, snow, that dense northern stillness. But then, there it is. In the middle of the trees, standing completely still, tall, broad, and covered in thick, dark fur. Its frame is massive, but it's the posture that sends chills. Upright, almost human, but not quite. And then you notice the detail. Off to one side, stretching from behind a tree, an arm, long, inhumanly long, and at the end of it, a massive hand, hanging still, almost too calm. Locals around Fort Frances have passed down stories of things like this. Strange figures in the woods, distant eyes, echoes that don't belong. But this wasn't a story. It was real, recorded. And maybe the strangest part? It didn't run. It didn't flinch. It just stood there, as if it knew she was watching. And it wanted her to. The girl who filmed it says one thing clearly: she's never going into those woods alone again. And now that you've seen it, would you? It was a calm, humid day deep in the jungles of Borneo. The kind of place untouched by time, green, quiet, and hiding secrets no man was meant to see. A lone cameraman floats gently in a wooden boat near the edge of a jungle lake. His eyes scanned, just another day of filming wildlife. But what he captured has baffled everyone who's seen it. Out of the corner of his lens, movement. At first he thought it was a trick of the jungle, maybe a large monkey, a bear even. But when he zoomed in, everything changed. There, sitting low in the tall grass, was something else entirely. It was huge, covered in reddish-brown fur that glowed in the daylight. Its arms were long, resting on the ground like giant tree branches. It seemed calm, methodical, its eyes scanning the grass in front of it, picking at something. The cameraman, frozen in disbelief, kept filming. And then, the creature looked up. Its face was strange. Human, but not. Its features were broad. Deep-set eyes, a pronounced brow ridge, a flat, wide nose. And then, what made it truly chilling, it reached out. Not aggressively, not wild. It reached like it was asking for something. The cameraman, unsure what to do, grabbed an apple from his bag. Slowly, he tossed it toward the creature. And the creature caught it. Yes, caught it. Then, as casually as a person on their lunch break, it took a bite, chewed, and stared. It didn't flinch. It didn't growl. It simply ate and observed. Its hands were clearly visible, large, thick-fingered, black-skinned palms, hands that didn't belong to any normal animal. Its body? Too massive to be just an orangutan. Its presence? Too calm to be feral, too aware. Was this a lost species of Sasquatch? A jungle wizard of old legends? Or something even stranger? Whatever it was, it had intelligence behind its eyes. The cameraman slowly moved away, not out of fear, but out of respect. Whatever he had just met wasn't a beast. It was something more. And the footage is crystal clear. No shaky cam, no wild screaming, just a quiet, intelligent encounter in the middle of nowhere. Some call it the jungle Sasquatch. Others say it's just a clever orangutan. But look closely, and you'll see what so many can't explain. That moment, it wasn't just rare, it was impossible. So, what would you do? If you met something in the wild that wasn't supposed to exist? Would you run, or would you share your apple? Whatever your answer, just remember it's still out there, watching, waiting, and it might not be alone. It was meant to track a different predator. In the remote wilderness of Alberta, Canada, a trail camera was quietly placed, programmed to study the movement and behavior of wolverines. Agile, elusive, and rarely seen. But what it caught instead was something no wildlife researcher expected. 105 seconds of footage. A single moment of the unexplainable, preserved by lens and chance. The video begins in silence. The forest is thick, quiet, and unmoving. Nothing stirs except the swaying of distant branches. Then, with near imperceptible motion, a massive figure begins to take shape from the landscape itself. Camouflaged against the trunk of a pine, It had been standing completely still, its hair blending perfectly with bark, its posture rigid, calculating. This is not mistaken identity. This is deliberate concealment. Watch yourself. It steps forward cautiously. The body is fully upright. Its frame is broad and imposing, easily measuring between 6 and 7 feet in height. Muscles ripple beneath thick black hair as it moves across the forest floor with quiet purpose. It does not glance at the camera. Its eyes are focused elsewhere, likely prey. At that moment, the camera, designed for wolverines, accidentally captures a high-definition study in predation. What's most shocking isn't just the creature's appearance, it's the intelligence behind its behavior. This being was not simply passing through. I watched it, hidden in plain sight. Every motion, every breath seemed synchronized with the sway of the forest around it, as if it had learned, through generations, how to disappear without vanishing. Sonny Vator's video has since sparked serious interest among seasoned trackers and wildlife experts. The background matching technique displayed, intentional blending into the environment, is not a known behavior of any North American animal aside from humans. So the question remains, who or what adapts like this in the wild? And how many more trail cameras might hold secrets still buried in digital files, waiting for someone to look again? If you've ever set a trail cam and caught something you can't explain, now is the time. Come forward, tell your story. It began with a view of calm, the kind of stillness only a high mountain lake can offer. A lone hiker had set out that spring morning in Payson Canyon, Utah, capturing the quiet beauty of nature, the glint of water between the trees, the soft bend of branches swaying in the breeze. His camera drifted gently across the lake's surface, recording a moment of peace. But then, something shifted. The camera jolted, swinging away from the shoreline and toward the tree line. Something was there. In the blur of motion, what emerges is impossible to ignore. A tall, black figure standing upright among the pines. It does not flinch or flee. It simply stands, as if observing. Between 6 and 7 feet tall, covered in dark, heavy hair, it blends unnaturally well into the forest. The footage, zoomed and stabilized by the Paranormal Review, reveals what appears to be a creature unlike anything native to the region. The camera catches it mid-step, arms swinging low with weight, as if it had been caught just before vanishing deeper into the trees. The man who took this footage never meant for it to go public. He captured it in the spring of 2015 while hiking alone through Payson Canyon in central Utah. For years he kept the clip buried, afraid of ridicule or disbelief. It wasn't until nearly a decade later that he passed it on to the Paranormal Review, hoping someone else might see what he saw that day. Something not supposed to exist. In the early seconds, the camera pans nervously. There's no narration, no commentary, just the thud of stones tumbling and the wind in the trees. Then, stabilized and enhanced, the footage locks onto the shape. Towering between 6 and 7 feet tall, the creature stands with its back partially turned, its limbs long and its body blanketed in thick black hair. It appears to be moving with purpose, neither fleeing nor hiding, but roaming, almost patrolling. Watch yourself. Despite the digital improvements, the footage remains raw. The figure doesn't blur like a man in a costume. It shifts weight with natural heaviness. Its gait is grounded, deliberate. When it turns slightly, a subtle glint reveals a sunlit patch on its shoulder, showing depth and motion impossible to fake. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanishes behind a patch of dense timber. The rocks have stopped falling. The silence returns. But what remains is a recording that continues to challenge the boundaries of belief. Springtime in Payson Canyon reveals much, but for one hiker it revealed too much. If you've been holding on to footage, unsure of what to do with it, maybe now's the time. Share it. The forest doesn't lie, but silence might. High above the tree line, where the silence is as vast as the sky itself, two men found themselves alone on the slopes of Mount St. Helens. Their camera had been trained on the sweeping horizon, filming the wide-open volcanic terrain. But what they captured was not just geological beauty. It was something altogether unexplainable. From a distance, beyond the reach of ordinary hikers, a dark figure moved across the barren stretch. At first glance, it seemed out of place, too large, too fluid, and far too distinct against the ashen backdrop of the mountain. Despite the incredible distance, the form stood out sharply. Tall, broad, and cloaked in black, the silhouette appeared to be walking upright with long, deliberate strides. It had no gear, no tools, and no reason to be there. Watch closely. Uploaded by Bigfoot. Believers only, the video has become a quiet sensation among those who study the unexplained. The terrain where the figure walks is isolated and treacherous. No casual wanderer would venture there. And yet the way the figure navigates the uneven slope suggests confidence and familiarity. The men behind the camera remain silent, their disbelief louder than words. They zoom in shakily, and for a moment, the creature comes into sharper focus.
Hey, there's something down there. You see that in the clearing?
Oh, yeah.
See the stride. The scale is hard to process until one notices the trees and rock formations nearby. Only then does the size of the figure become clear. This being is massive, between 7 and 8 feet tall and still distinguishable from so far away. It seems to dominate the landscape, even at a distance. It moves for only a short time before slipping behind a rocky outcrop. Then it is gone. Mount St. Helens holds many secrets beneath its slopes. Some are geological, others historical, but a few like this remain rooted in mystery. If you've captured something unexplainable on camera, don't leave it buried. Share what you've seen. Let the mountains speak. Re-watch the final moments. It began on the 8th of July, 2012, deep within the Sierra Nevada wilderness, near the quiet settlement of Clipper Mills, California. Hidden between the thick trunks of pine and cedar, a sound rose that has haunted all who've heard it since. A sound not meant for human ears. What was captured that night is now known as the longest sustained Bigfoot vocalization ever recorded. It was raw, guttural, and stretched out in intervals no man or beast has ever matched. This was not just a cry. It was a declaration.
It's crazy.
Not a bear.
That's no dog.
It's a bear.
I think he's a bear.
Listen closely. Posted by the YouTube channel Big Toe Time, the audio was captured during a backwoods expedition. The recorder had been placed with the intent to monitor local wildlife. But what it caught that night was not bear, coyote, or mountain lion. It was something else, something intelligent, something alive with power. The screams continue, sometimes distant, then suddenly close, shaking the very leaves above the mic. Patterns begin to emerge, repetitions, a kind of rhythm that seems deliberate, not chaotic.
The dog's right over there. Whatever it is over there. There's a bunch of them. They're talking. They're just communicating.
That's not
Yeah, there's one back there too, like earlier.
Yeah, that's not a dog bark.
You can hear the dog barking amongst these howls.
As the minutes pass, the cries don't weaken. They intensify. There is pacing now. Movement. What began as isolated yells grows into an eerie performance of dominance or distress. At one point, two distinct vocalizations overlap, suggesting that more than one creature may have been present. And still not a single human voice can be heard. 15 minutes of edited audio, 20 minutes experienced live. Near the end, the vocalizations fade, not with exhaustion, but with an unsettling quiet. The forest falls still again. Whatever was out there had made its presence known, and then vanished into the tree line.
Shut up. Peanut, stay here. Penny, stop.
For the chilling final echo, if these are the cries of a creature not yet understood, then the Sierras may hold more than mere wildlife. They may hold witnesses to a hidden chapter of evolution, heard but still unseen. Are you listening? Are you ready to believe? Then don't just hear it, feel it. The truth may still be echoing. There are places where the wild flows too freely to be tamed, where the rivers carve their truth into the land, and something ancient watches from the shadows. Just beyond Calgary, Alberta, at the quiet edge of a riverbank, the impossible revealed itself one overcast afternoon. A casual walk turned to silence when movement in the distance caught the attention of two people filming for their channel, Fox RF600. What they captured in that brief moment became one of the most chilling Bigfoot clips recorded on Canadian soil. Before the camera was fully trained on the figure, it had already moved, taking just a few calculated steps, pausing, and then crouching low into the brush, as if it knew it was being watched.
That's not human. That's not a human.
See the moment it turns. The video is brief, but every frame tells more than words ever could. A bulky, dark shape against the pale earth, covered head to toe in thick black hair. What makes the encounter unforgettable is not just the figure's presence, but its motion. It looks back. Not in panic, not in confusion, but in awareness, recognition.
It's here at first, but not sure. That is not a human.
Watch the eyes lock. One of the witnesses, barely whispering, can be heard saying, "That's not a human." And they're right. The proportions are off. The head too wide, the face undefined, yet far from expressionless. The way it crouches suggests it knows the river trail. It is not lost. It is not out of place. Then the forest reclaims it. The figure sinks into the natural camouflage, leaving no sound, no sign, only the digital trace of its presence.
That is not a human.
Witness the final disappearance. If real, what stood there at the river's edge was something far older than any trail map. Something that watches us from between the trees and knows exactly when to vanish. The question is not what it was, but who saw it. And the answer, caught forever on this recording, is simple. We all did. Are you ready to face what waits beyond the last bend in the river? What kind of creature willingly dives into alligator-infested waters, only to vanish without a trace? And what if it wasn't human, not a bear, but something we're not supposed to believe exists? It was a quiet January afternoon in the Florida swamplands. The stillness of Lettuce Lake Park, a 240-acre stretch of dense wetland northeast of Tampa, was broken only by the paddle strokes of a lone canoeist. Matt, the man behind the camera, wasn't expecting anything unusual that day. He was drifting slowly through backwater channels, his eyes watching for birds, maybe a few deer. But what he found left him shaken. A dark figure appears along the bank. It seems upright, vaguely bear-like. But the more it moves, the more that theory falls apart. The arms swing too long, the stride too deliberate. It wades through waist-deep swamp like a trained swimmer, undeterred by the thick roots and silt-heavy waters. Matt did what anyone with a pulse and a phone would do. He started filming. He assumed at first it was a bear, perhaps disoriented or desperate. But Lettuce Lake isn't known for bears. In fact, park rangers had warned that bears avoid the area entirely, likely due to the high population of gators and venomous snakes. If it was a human, it wasn't acting like one. And if it wasn't a bear, the question gets more complicated. Matt emailed his footage to the Bigfoot Evidence YouTube channel, the long-standing archive for strange sightings across North America. The video, which arrived on January 15, 2015, was published just days later, an unedited, raw glimpse into something no one can explain. What strikes most viewers isn't just the form of the creature, but its behavior. It doesn't hesitate. It moves through the swamp like it belongs there. Watch yourself. The figure looks up, not directly at the camera, but towards something in the direction of Matt's canoe. Then, without warning, it begins to drift into deeper water. It lowers itself, gradually submerging until its entire body disappears below the surface. There's no splashing, no panic, just a calculated descent, until nothing remains but ripple trails in the dark green water. Matt paddled forward, cautiously, but the creature was gone. There were no bubbles, no shape underwater, no sign of where it went. And this wasn't a wide lake with hiding spots. This was a tight, shallow, gator-infested corner of the swamp, a place where nothing dives unless it knows exactly what it's doing. Skeptics were quick to offer explanations. A man in a suit, a lost animal, a trick of light. But Matt's concern was genuine. In his email, he emphasized that no sane person would voluntarily walk and dive through that part of the swamp. Not with the risk of 12-foot alligators lurking underfoot, or water moccasins curled beneath the reeds. The footage slows slightly. You can see the texture of the creature's arms as it emerges from the thick brush. There's no fur matting like a bear, no reflective gear like a human diver, just long, matte dark limbs, moving with heavy grace. The proportions don't fit any known species in the region, and no zoo or wildlife authority ever reported anything loose in the area. Was it the fabled skunk ape of Florida lore? Or something else, something undocumented? The swamp holds its secrets close. This encounter, sent not by a hunter but a casual witness with no agenda, forces us to reconsider what might still roam America's wild pockets. Not everything leaves tracks. Not everything makes a sound. But once you see something like this, you don't forget it. Matt's final words linger. Certainly can't explain it myself. If you believe something unknown still calls the Florida wilderness home, or if you've seen anything like this with your own eyes, let us know in the comments. Subscribe to Bigfoot Evidence for real footage, real witnesses, and real questions that demand answers. Because out there in the forgotten corners of the swamp, legends don't stay buried. They walk, swim, and disappear. It begins with stillness, the kind of quiet only deep forest roads can hold. No distant engines, no human presence, just the soft rustle of trees and the rhythmic hum of wind pressing through pine. A man stands far outside the tree line, recording a seemingly uneventful forest scene. He doesn't know it yet, but his lens has captured something extraordinary. Something upright, something black, and completely unaware it's being watched. At first it appears as just another trunk, dark, motionless, but something about it draws the eye. The proportions are off, wider at the top, tapering into a distinct shoulder line. It doesn't sway with the wind. It doesn't blend completely with the tree bark. And then the realization hits. It's not a tree at all. Watch yourself there, behind a curtain of pine and brush. A black, upright figure stands, no movement, no acknowledgement, as if carved into the forest itself. But the contours are too defined. The head, shaped with a subtle slope. The torso, broad and uniform. And most chilling of all, the arms hanging unnaturally long at its sides. The footage, uploaded by the channel Bigfoot's Testimony, carries no commentary, no dramatization, just raw documentation. And in its simplicity lies the weight of truth. The witness never enters the forest. He never calls out. Whether from instinct or awe, he simply films and lets the evidence speak for itself. The creature doesn't react. It remains fixed behind the thickest part of the tree cover, its posture eerily neutral. Most encounters, if they're even real, feature a fleeing subject, startled by human presence. But not this one. This creature, whatever it is, doesn't know it's being watched. That's what makes this sighting different. And that's what makes it terrifying. Zoomed in, the silhouette becomes undeniable. No fur texture is visible at this range, but the shape is unmistakable. Bipedal, dense, and tall. Its head doesn't move. Neither does the body. It's not reacting because it doesn't know. It's simply existing in the moment, perfectly still, camouflaged in plain sight. There's something about the footage that lingers. Perhaps it's the contrast between distance and proximity. From where the man is standing, the forest is serene. But just beyond the first few rows of trees, something primeval watches the woods. Or perhaps guards them. Texas, the Pacific Northwest, Appalachia, each region has its share of reports. But it's these fleeting, accidental glimpses that grip the public imagination. Not stories told around fires or blurry trail cams. It's the unintentional captures, the chance alignments between human and unknown, that keep the search alive. The figure eventually shifts, subtly. Not enough to catch if you're not looking, but the foliage near its side seems to compress. The arm, perhaps, pressing against branches as the body leans or slightly repositions. And then, just as fast, it stills once more. The shape softens into the forest shadows as the camera pulls back. A moment frozen, 1,000 questions raised, and not one answered. So what stood behind those trees that day? So still, so unaware, and so deeply camouflaged within its element. Could it be the legendary Bigfoot, observing in silence? Or was it something else entirely? Something native to the forest, but foreign to us. Before you decide, watch again. Look beyond the obvious. Follow the shadows. The truth, as always, is in the stillness. Share your thoughts below. And if you believe in revealing what lies beyond the trail, subscribe and stay with us. Because the forest doesn't always keep its secrets.